Good day, ladies. Welcome to the next little bit of reproductive strategies in animals. This one's not going to involve any awkward diagrams, so let's hope Donique is coping a little bit better over there. All right, so today we're going to be looking at Precocial and Articial. Oh, Articial. I actually went and tried to figure out how to pronounce this. It's Articial. Sorry. Precocial and Articial development. I actually went onto YouTube and it explains how to do it. Anyway, okay, so I've put a diagram of two little birdies over there, baby birds, and the one is Articial and the other one's Precocial. You could notice that there is a significant difference in terms of how developed they are by the time they actually arrive outside of the egg. So now we've gone through the whole process of how to find a mate, how to fertilize the egg, and then the egg itself. But now once the individual pops out of the egg, how developed are they? Okay, so it describes a development present in young birds when they hatch. It also has to do with some mammals, but we mainly just focus on birds. So precocial development birds are capable of moving around soon after they hatch, whereas Articial development means that they're not capable of moving around on its own after hatching. Okay, and we'll talk about why certain they choose one of these two things, and it's mainly because of the environment that the eggs are busy developing in. So whether it is a stable environment or unstable environment. So let's look at precocial development first, also because I can pronounce it properly. They show the following characteristics. You need to know these off by heart. When they hatch, their eyes are open. Their bodies are covered with soft feathers called down feathers. A lot of you have them in your pillows. Yes, feel bad about it, even me. They are able to move soon after they hatch. They are able to feed themselves, and they are independent of their parents. So right out of the egg, they can run around, they can start feeding. To a large extent, there is going to be some sort of parental care, but less parental care with precocial development as opposed to Articial. So what are some of the advantages of it? Hatchlings are able to avoid predation to some extent, so they can run and hide at least. But the disadvantages are that the hatchlings have relatively large brains, which means that they are cognitive, and it means that they'll develop quicker, but they're going to need so much more food. So the brain size does not increase greatly, small in relation to the body at adulthood. So it's almost like they are also born with the same size brain that they'll have for their entire life. So this is ultimately where you hear that saying, like when someone is a bird brain, it means that they have a very small brain. So here's a good example. These are little ducklings. They are adorable, and they are filled with that soft feather. That feather as well is also really good at keeping in warmth, as well as it's water resistant to a large extent. Then let's look at Articial development. So birds that show this type of development originally lived in environments that did not have many predators and had very little food. So if you are in an environment which has both very little food and very little predators, it will then pay to go through Articial development. Therefore, the eggs produced did not have as much energy as those of precocial species. Therefore, there is less energy for the development within the eggs. So it's really just to get the offspring itself out so that the mother can start looking after it. Therefore, the development of birds with this type of development is poor. So there's some pictures of some birds that just aren't developing. You can see that their eyes are completely closed. You can see that there's no feathers. So the eyes are closed, they don't have down feathers, and they are not able to move much. They're able to wriggle around, but that's where it ends. They are not able to feed themselves when they're newly hatched, and they depend on their parent completely. There is good parts of this and there are bad parts of this. The good parts are that, and we'll go to advantages, disadvantages, but while I'm thinking about it, you're going to learn from your parents from a very young age, and they're going to have to bring you up, which means that, your development is ultimately based on your parents. So if you get a diet of worms, and seeds, you're probably going to be good. But if you get, leaves and twigs where your body really has to fight for the energy, you might not develop as well. From the characteristics, we can see that the animals are not well developed, and therefore they will have to spend more time in the nest. But remember that this is because of the predators and the amount of food present. They stay in the nest until they are able to fly, walk, or swim. Therefore, the parents have to protect and hide their nests to prevent the entire brood from being eaten by predators. Example of birds that show this type of development are songbirds and bats. But some mammals also show articial development. Humans, to a large extent, are Articial, Articial, mammal like human beings. Because think about it, when we are born, our eyes are closed to a large extent. Well, we haven't developed pigment in our eyes. We rely on our parents very heavily, so we also go through this type of development. So let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages. So they're born small-brained. Rich diet allows for brain growth. So a larger brain leads to better adaptability and intelligence. However, the disadvantages are that the hatchlings are extremely vulnerable. They need to conceal their nests, and chicks are totally dependent on their parents for survival. This is no shade at women. So here is a beautiful little example over there. You can see how they just take really long to develop, but ultimately these birds are potentially far more intelligent, and they can actually just function better as adults. So you do, however, get in-between species. So here we're just talking about, the ones that are truly precocial and the ones that are true Articial. However, not all birds fall into this either, so some species have a mixture of both types of development. For example, when some birds hatch, their eyes are open, but they have down feathers. But they are unable to move about or feed themselves. Okay, so we do get this mixture. Therefore, the parents need to feed them and protect them, like hawks. Okay, so interesting. So hawks are this mixture of the two, and there are quite a couple of examples where it's more of a continuum, where you got the super precocial and the super articial right on either side, and then you can have mixtures in between over there. And this has to deal with nest building, feeding, and protection. All right, so now moving on from now you have a child that has developed somewhat. Now we need to look after them, and we need to make sure how much parental care we're actually going to offer to our offspring. So not all species care for their young, obviously, and we've actually always thought throughout the years that reptiles show absolutely no parental care. Even to a large extent, we found that eventually even large snakes in the desert, when they put their brood or their hatchlings right at the bottom of sand, to keep them warm, they actually go up to the surface of the sand. They heat up, and then they go back down, and they share that heat on top of their eggs as well. So that is a form of parental care. So don't think that all species are just kind of pathetic in terms of parental care, but some show nothing whatsoever, especially insects. Okay, so we have an R strategy species and a K strategy species. We'll give them better names a little bit later, but better name is just like type 1 and type 3. So R strategy species do not care for their young. They produce large number of offspring, and not all which will survive. Okay, so we're producing tons and tons. When I'm talking about lots, I'm not talking 9. I'm talking like 50 to 1,000. Okay. We have our K strategy, which they show parental care, produce fewer offspring. Offspring are cared for and fed until capable of independence. Okay, so you can instantly pick up that humans are K strategy, and then something like an insect or something with a very short lifespan is going to be an R strategy. Okay, so this is what rocked up in your first cycle test, so that you guys know. So on the far right at the top over there, it says number of survivors, and we have percentage of maximum lifespan. All right, so this tells you how much offspring or the number of survivors there are, so like how much offspring there are initially, and then how much they are right towards the end. So at a K selection, we're going to see that there are like there's not many, because it's a log scale. So they're kind of just saying that the ones that are born survive for a very long time, and then as time goes on, their lifespan decreases as at a much older age. Whereas with that particular thing over there, which is an oyster, many are produced, but many die at a very young age. And then that means that towards the older years, that's when you have very few individuals. Then we have, so again, K selection is type 1, whereas R selection is type 2. And then we have mortality constant, which is type 2, all right? And squirrels, a lot of rodents, they also follow this. Some birds are type 2. And it's very odd. It kind of insinuates that there is a very constant decline from the amount born till the amount dead over time. Okay, so over here at the bottom of here, I have included a table which I recommend you draw and learn. R strategy is for unstable environments, whereas K is for stable environments. So the organisms are very small in R-type, large in K. Energy used to make each individual's low in R. Remember, like insects, they just plop an egg down and they fly off. There's no need to put extra energy into it. Whereas in K strategy, it is a high amount of energy. And I also just saw over there as well, the R strategy is density independent, whereas K is density dependent. Humans will produce more or less depending on the environment, whereas insects are just going to produce whether you like it or not. So offspring produced in R is many, in K is few. Time of maturation is early, so they mature extremely quickly, whereas with the K strategy, it's much later with much parental care. And as we learned earlier, some have a lot of parental care and some do not. Life expectancy is short in R, but much longer in K. Lifetime reproductive events, so how many times they reproduce in their life. Once. An insect reproduces once and then they die. Whereas in K strategy, it's more than one. It might be 2, it might be 3, but it will always be more than 1. Survivorship curve, type 3, and then type 1 or 2, okay? So that type 2 can bend quite a lot, and so can type 1 and type 3, but to a large extent, that is kind of what we look at. All right, so in terms of parental care, this is how you answer a question. With fewer offspring born, there is longer parental care period, and this increases the survival chances quite a lot. And there's a little crocodile in over there where they often don't eat their offspring. That's not what's happening there. But the baby, I don't actually think that might be a caiman. They keep them inside their mouths, and that actually keeps them safe because they are predated on quite heavily by other reptiles as well as birds. So reproduction and care for young requires a lot of energy. Remember, like feeding something requires you to go and hunt for food, bring it back, maybe even chew it up, regurgitate it into your offspring's mouth, and that's how they'll actually be able to grow, which means that you might not get as much energy if you were the parent. So the number of offspring produced at any given time is usually inversely proportional to the amount of energy invested in parental care. Lots of words. All that it means is if I have more offspring, we're going to put less energy into them. But if we have less offspring, we're going to have more energy put into it. And that ultimately will lead to them surviving more. Here's some terminology for you guys. I'm not going to go through this. You guys can pause the video over here. You guys can write this down. But it's just some of the big words that I've been throwing around. So fertilization, external fertilization, internal fertilization, ovipary, vivipary, ovovivipary, precocial, articial development, and then finally parental care. All right, ladies. So I know that this was quite quick and to the point, but it is super important for you guys to understand where we're going with this. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.